Welcome back to The Big Show. It's Alex Belfield in the morning, talking to the star of a new British film. It's called The King's Speech, and it's released this week and tells the story of George VI's battle to overcome a terrible stammer. Michael Palin, how are you?
I'm very well, thanks. Very well indeed.
Hey, listen, thank you for talking to me. One,
Pleasure.
because you're a genius, and two, because you're a legend, and C, because you must have better people to talk to than me, Michael.
Nobody better. I've gone trawled the world of great celebrities. I am that desperate.
How's your life going? I just had John Cleese on last week, and he's out doing the business again, and you're in such a great place now because you can pick and choose, can't you?
Well, I've always been able to, really. It's been one of the great joys of a freelance life. I've managed to do things that I wanted to do and in which I had some sort of control and some kind of connection, and things that I've enjoyed. I've done very few things which I haven't enjoyed, either for the money or because someone told me to do them. So I've been very, very lucky, actually, to pick and choose. And most of the decisions I've made have been, been my own and have been reasonably what I wanted to do.
Have you reached that point yet where in your own mind you've got nothing to prove and you've made it, and if you just leave us with your legacy that's already out there, that's enough? Or are you still fighting for something?
Oh, I never think in terms of legacy or really what you leave behind. It's very much you take each day as it comes. I want to make sure that I keep producing material because just to keep my brain and body going, and I have as much of an appetite for life and the world and I'm as curious about things as I ever was. It's just a question of making sure that you continue to do good work. And throughout my working life, I've sort of been very, very lucky to work with people who set a very high standard. And I want to make sure I keep up that standard and don't just sort of gradually fade and do things that are rather dull. So that's really what I'm concerned about.
When we look at your history, you've had such a blessed career in one way, but you put the groundwork in, didn't you? I mean, you're always funny and trying to be funny.
Well, I was lucky in that I could always make people laugh at school and things like that, but I never expected I would ever make that into a career. And indeed, my parents would have been, very anxious that I didn't make that into a career. But the people who were my heroes when I was young were not actually comedy performers so much as writers, people like Simpson and Galton, who wrote Hancock and Steptoe and Son and Spike Milligan. I just thought these are great. I'd love to be able to write that sort of stuff. And I very fortunately, after university, hanging around, I took up a writing partnership with Terry Jones, and we were very lucky to end up writing for the first Frost Report, and then for a kids' series called Do Not Adjust Your Set, and that led on to Monty Python after 4 or 5 years. I think it was just that I knew I could do that, but I wasn't quite sure how you got into it. It's not like you don't do an apprenticeship in writing comedy. It's just something you feel and you, if it's right, you carry on, even though it doesn't pay very much to start with, which it really didn't.
I said to John Cleese a few weeks ago when I had him on the programme, do you think that Monty would be made today if it were put forward? Because it's so silly, throwing a cow over a wall isn't exactly genius, is it? But it worked in that time.
What did he say?
He said no, it wouldn't be made.
I'd agree with him. I think we'd have to explain it far too much. And I think the BBC has sort of plans things more carefully and vets things more carefully. There was a kind of cavalier time at the end of the 60s, not just in television, but in music and fashion and all that, where people were expected to produce something new. And, it was no great sort of deal for the BBC to offer a bunch of people 13 programs to do something they didn't quite understand in a basement, in the basement studio in TV Centre, but that's what we did.
Was it as funny and sexy as it appeared to us on the outside? You seemed to have a lot of fun.
Yeah, we did have a lot of fun. Yeah, it was great. I mean, it was sort of, it was probably equivalent of sort of sitting around in the pub and telling each other jokes, and yet getting paid for it. We all, were a comedy show, and we all made each other laugh a lot, and it was rather exciting discovering that there was a kind of chemistry as far as the humour went amongst us all, and it wasn't... you don't necessarily expect that 6 people will be able to produce a show. It seems a rather cumbersome number, but for some strange reason, the 6 of us really made each other laugh, and the comedy was complementary. Everyone added a bit to it. I mean, we had completely different ways of life apart from that, but when it came to sitting around a table and writing comedy, it was really a wonderful sort of powerful sort of unit, and with Terry Gilliam doing the animation as well, that was something that no one else had at the time. We did enjoy it. Yeah, it was very exciting. Yeah.
You've worked with so many. Who's impressed you the most in terms of comic timing?
Well, I think that I would say John Cleese is superb to work with. I've done many sketches with him, and it's like a finely tuned piece of sort of music, getting the right moment and the right pause. And I've worked with Maggie Smith, who's incomparable. But there are a lot of people who understand comedy, whether it's Tim Spall or whoever. That you just know that they know how to play it, and more importantly, good people to write it. I mean, I'm very lucky to have had scripts from, done films with John Cleese script, with Alan Bennett's script, both brilliant. Alan Bleasdale too, not always comedy, but there's something very good about the way he constructs a script, and if you do it well, you've got the timing right, yeah.
Are you only as good as your writing? Can you bring rubbish to life because you're a great actor or comedian, or is it all in the writing?
I think it's basically in the writing to start with, which is why Python was so strong, because we wrote and we performed our own material. If something doesn't work on the page, I think you're going to struggle to make it work in performance. It's as simple as that. So I do think writing, getting it right first is very, very important.
Most recently, we know you for travelling. That's been a big part of your life, and I wish I could be just you for a few minutes, because you've seen so many wonderful things, and I think a person who's travelled is so much more interesting than someone who's lived in the same place and never gone anywhere, because it teaches you so much about other people and cultures. Do you see how blessed and lucky you were to get those gigs?
Yes, I am. I eternally sort of thank the fates that I took up that job on Around the World in 80 Days after about 4 or 5 other people had turned it down. But I think it was, I realise now that I'd always wanted to travel. And in a sense, it's also about meeting people, which I've always quite enjoyed. And that was what made it work. And I think we created a way of travelling which was more a series of encounters rather than some expert telling you about the world. And that's the way I've always, I've always done it, and that's what I enjoy about those journeys. But it was just very, very surprising and very gratifying that this rather rough and ready form of traveling that we, got me through Around the World in 80 days, a camera following me everywhere, even where I'm making terrible mistakes and goofs and getting ill and all that sort of thing, worked. No one had really done that, because you don't create something like that. You don't say, let's send someone around the world to get ill and forget his lines and get the language wrong.
Have you ever considered that you created reality TV? Because when I think of the Bush Tucker trial or whatever they do on that dreadful I'm a Celebrity, I mean, you were doing it 30 years ago, weren't you?
Well, for real, yeah. No one had to create it. I mean, just eating the local food. But I think throwing yourself into the local culture is quite important, yeah.
What did you learn? What was the most interesting place you visited? Who was the most interesting person you met on your journey?
I always think Peru was a pretty amazing place. The reason why I say it is because it was a combination of absolutely stunning scenery, the Andes and then the high plain with Cuzco and Machu Picchu, but also because it was the furthest I've got off the beaten track. We went beyond Machu Picchu, which most people don't do, onto the headwaters of the Amazon, down some whitewater rapids and into a wonderful canyon called the Pongo de Manaique. And it was just the most beautiful place. The rock was shining black, the water was pouring out of the forest, and there were these huge, great black butterflies. I remember that, and I thought, now this is getting away from it all. This is really the essence of why I travel. But you have to have Heathrow Airport at the same time, so you don't get all the best.
You must be very relieved you don't have to travel today with all those scanners and security. It'd take forever, wouldn't it?
Well, it is more difficult now, oddly enough. I mean, although you can fly around the world, you're many more restrictions, but it's still a great. I'm still terribly tempted to travel. I look at atlases, I look at maps. I'm an absolute sucker for glossy photos of remote parts of the world.
And of course, everybody knows you for your travelling. Everybody knows you, of course, for the comedy. But what people might not know is you've got the Michael Palin Centre for Stammering Children, which was opened in 1993. Why did you want to do that?
Because my father had a very severe stammer. And it was with him all the time. I knew him, and there seemed to be no information on why the stammer had where it had begun. All I knew about it was that it obviously affected his life quite seriously. It meant he couldn't just get up and talk around the table as his other sort of business colleagues could without a lot of pressure. Couldn't even tell jokes, really, without sort of thinking about it very carefully. And so, he never knew when he would be fluent or not fluent, and I think it made him very frustrated. And after I made A Fish Called Wanda, in which I played a stammerer, various people got in touch with me, and two of them had a new therapy for dealing with stammering in childhood. And I thought, well, this is very interesting. And they said, that's the time. If you can get a child with a stammer when they're quite young, before the stammer has become absolutely established, then you can manage that stammer. You can't cure it, but you can actually improve things so much that their lives won't be blighted in the way that my father's life was blighted, and that they'll be able to just, like any other fluent people, be able to sort of take life and take life's chances ahead of them. So that was why I said, all right, I'll get involved.
It must be very difficult because it's one of those socially awkward things, isn't it? That kind of is self-fulfilling. You get nervous, then you stammer, and you don't want to stammer, so you stammer even more because you're thinking about it. It must be very difficult to get out of that circle.
Yes, I think that's absolutely it. A lot of it is to do with pressure, which is what the film The King's Speech is all about. Here's the monarch. You'd think, well, he's all right, he's top of the pile, but it's just as bad, if not worse, for him, because he has to sort of verbalize what the nation should be thinking at any one time. And it is all about pressure, and my father was much more relaxed at home. His stammer would be less pronounced. But if he was with people he just met, or if there's something the irony is, if there's something you really want to say and it's really important to you, that's when the block might come. But it's most interesting the way the therapy works with the children. They get children together in a group, and all these children who stammer finding out about each other and why they all stammer. I think the problem with my dad was that we didn't talk about it. We all it was brushed under the carpet because nothing we could do. Therefore, don't make it worse by sort of bringing the subject up. And I think the great thing about the Stammering Centre and the wonderful work they do there is that they confront the problem and they don't pretend it's not there, and they try and understand why it exists, and a lot of children are very much helped by that.
And what I can see from the website is there's hope. There's someone there who can listen and help, and there is a way forward, isn't there? Yes,
definitely, and the more the merrier. We have our Centre of Excellence in London, and we're hoping that it will be expanded, because I think there need to be more places like this around the country. And I do know that the Leeds Bradford NHS people and the Stammering Charity are discussing a possible North of England centre, which would be terrific.
Well, if you manage to get that going, do come on again. This has been a great honour and a pleasure for me. Thank you so much for your time, Michael Palin. Google the Michael Palin Centre for Stammering Children, find out more there. The new film, British film as well, The King's Speech, is released this week, and it's out now and getting tremendous reviews as well. And Michael Palin, thank you so much for your time. Great honour, and good luck with everything.
A pleasure. Thank you, Alex.